The greatest enemy of the oppressed is not an ignorant mind. It's actually an ignorant mind that has been given false knowledge. Because an ignorant person might seek for the truth, but an ignorant mind that has been given false knowledge, believing is true, stops searching for the truth, thus becoming mentally enslaved by the false knowledge. It's the true reason why white oppressive forces have fed so much disinformation into black communities in regards to our plight and our condition. Because they know that as long as they keep our understandings of our plight and conditions flawed, then all of our liberating remedies and strategies that stem from those misunderstandings will also be flawed, thus hindering our ability to develop the proper counter strategies that are necessary in order to truly liberate ourselves. They don't want us ever gaining an accurate understanding of our plight and condition. This is why they now have millions of us believing that we're the true Jews found within an easily proven as being fictional Bible written by our most ungodliest enemies. Also, why there are many of us believing that we're the indigenous Americans, although millions of us have taken DNA analysis that have scientifically confirmed that we are in fact Africans. They also have millions of us believing that we're suffering from a silly slave syndrome myth, which presents what would in fact be the least plausible and the least effective method used for controlling generations of millions of people. Those noted beliefs are held by those of us that are ignorant. Whenever people are ignorant, nonsense always makes a lot of sense to them. They'll always believe nonsense. A speaker of truth has no friends, and those of us that know the truth must speak and must teach African proverbs. Here's the truth. The African American culture has fundamentally changed from what it was during the 1960s. It has in fact changed 180 degrees. During the 1960s, African Americans implemented the most successful unified protest in U.S. history. It still remains unrivaled by any other group in U.S. history. Today, to the contrary, African Americans are now more divided than at any previous time in history. During the 1960s, we agreed unanimously that white oppressive forces were our worst enemies. Today, millions of us now insist that it's ourselves that are now our worst enemies. During the 1960s, we called ourselves brothers and sisters, and we called our oppressors crackers. Today, we're calling ourselves niggers and bitches, and we call them white people, thus respecting them more and ourselves much less. Millions of African Americans also now revere Caucasians in spite of a brutally horrific history, proving that Caucasians are not deserving of our reverence. These noted changes within the African American culture clearly benefits the white society. It's always by deliberate design whenever the culture of the oppressed changes in ways benefiting the oppressors. Furthermore, a culture never changes 180 degrees on its own. It's always by deliberate design whenever this happens. It's by design. White social science deliberately change the African American culture in ways that facilitates the white society's ongoing subjugation of African Americans. The hidden history and reason. The 1960s was the most turbulent decade within America's history. White America's blatant racist mistreatment of African Americans had reached its course, thus resulting in unprecedented unified black protests that eroded the nation's stability and global image. In response to that decade's unprecedented unified black protests, white oppressive forces began deploying an ideological subversion system against the African American culture, against the entire populace of African Americans. Ideological subversion is an offensive psychological warfare tool that uses disinformation, misinformation, and repetitive media subliminal programming to manipulate targeted populations to think and behave in ways that are against their own self-interest, and instead in ways serving the interests of those deploying the ideological subversion system. The purpose is to attack the targeted population at the psychological level in a bid to destabilize and undermine their entire structure. The goal is to spread so much disinformation into the black community until virtually everything believed by the African American population are lies that are designed to hinder our liberation. It confuses the black population to such an extent that no one is able to come to any sensible conclusion in the interest of liberating ourselves from white oppression. The ultimate goal is the complete collapse of the African American culture. In 1968, white social scientists hired by the Kerner Commission determined that an aggravating core factor for that decade's unprecedented unified black protests was caused by an elevated and unifying black collective self-esteem brought on by the emergence of the Black Pride movement. They therefore now keeps our collective self-esteems low by constantly bombarding us with fraudulent, black demoralizing propaganda about ourselves. They literally subject us to only receiving the fraudulent and worst narratives about ourselves. Those white social scientists also learned from studying the African American culture that whenever people are oppressed for long durations, their collective aggressions against their oppressors will continue to grow until it reaches a boiling point, resulting in massive acts of massive rebellion against their oppressors. The oppressed always eventually rebels against their oppressors. This is an inherent response within the collective human psyche whenever people are kept under long-term oppression. This is what was actually happening amongst the African American population during the 1960s. White racism had reached a boiling point within the collective minds of the African American population, which resulted in that decade's unprecedented unified black protests. Those white social scientists largely determined that they could subdue unified black protests by shifting black people's collective aggressions away from the white society and redirect it towards ourselves. They achieved this by constantly inundating us with fraudulent propaganda that misleads us to believe that it's ourselves that are now our worst enemies. They also now control us by making us in fear of each other through their black on black crime exaggerating propaganda campaigns. The white ruling power realized that a fearful black population is much more easy to control than a fearless one. Fear is one of the most powerful human emotions, and it can be used as a tool for controlling targeted populations. When a group is gripped by fear of a threat, people's rationality shuts down, making them easily manipulable by anyone that promises safety from the threat. The white society manipulated many black people to fear our own people and to believe that we therefore need the white society to protect us from our own people. Oppressive governments often maintains their grip over targeted groups by continually invoking fear and then proceeding to claim that only they, the ruling powers, have the means and ability to protect the population from such a threat. Fear within a targeted population are often consequences of narratives created by those in positions of power, individuals looking to take advantage of and manipulate others have long realized the power of fear. Ruling classes for many years have understood the power of intentionally invoking fear in the minds of the subordinate populations as a means of social control. Social scientists calls it fear psychosis. There is much more, including how they socially engineered us to call ourselves niggers, bitches, and how it affects us, how it aids in maintaining white dominance. There's also more about what's actually happening to us during our education development. But that's a lot. This will be too long. However, the supreme art of war is to subjugate a people without fighting them. White oppressive forces achieve this supreme warfare objective by deploying an ideological subversion system against African Americans. This is the truth of our plighted condition. We must elevate our minds above a biblical fairy tale and a silly slave syndrome, and we need to see the truth of our plighted condition. Because as long as our understandings remain flawed, all of our liberating remedies from those will also remain flawed. We have to learn the social sciences and then develop counter strategies to overcome them. They're deploying information warfare against us. They're programming our minds to think against our own interests. Brothers and sisters, it's time to wake up to our reality. One love and peace.